I'm Gary C. Johnson. You've seen these billboards and ads that say size matters. I agree. The size that matters is the size of the results the law firm gets for their clients. We have several multi-million-dollar verdicts here in Kentucky. In fact, our firm owns the record for the single largest personal injury verdict in the state of Kentucky. That's the size that matters to you. In Kentucky, give our firm the call.
If you're hurt, injured, don't waste time. Gary Johnson drives for every dime.
Welcome to Simply the Law of Life, a program created by attorney Gary C. Johnson. Simply the Law of Life provides free legal advice and encourages happiness and quality of life. Now, here's Simply the Law of Life with Gary C. Johnson and Keith Casebolt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into Simply the Law of Life. I'm Keith Casebolt, and I am sitting across from my dear friend who looks very upbeat and happy today.
I am very upbeat, and I am reasonably happy.
Reasonably?
Reasonably.
I like that. You didn't go out on a limb. You just said reasonably happy.
Well, it's always a struggle.
We're here, though. We start off with all the things to be happy about. First and foremost, we're here.
Talk to you a little bit today about joy and sorrow. What is joy when you think about it?
Well, if you spontaneously ask me, I would say watching the happiness in your kids' eyes, or, things with family and friends.
Well, I don't have any answer. So.
Yeah.
And then sorrow. We all can pretty well figure out what sorrow is, right?
Loss. Yeah.
Your kid achieves something, and you look at your child, and you're so proud of your child, and you have joy, or do you just have pride at that point? Now, let's take that same child and assume that that child had been involved in drugs.
Got in trouble.
Over a long period of time. And that you had experienced immense sorrow because of that. Because of what your child did. And then your child gets off the drugs and accomplishes something and gets a significant award for their accomplishments, and you're there. Do you feel pride? Are you proud, or do you feel absolute total joy?
Well, I'm sure you would be proud, but I would go more with the total joy, because you had experienced
all the sorrow, and you had experienced the joy before it, and now to have both of those feelings, I would go with the total joy. Am I making sense? Yeah. Because of the sorrow, you have the much greater joy when something is different. And that's what this book by Khalil Gibran, the prophet, says, is joy and sorrow go hand in hand. So much like the story in the Bible about the prodigal son, right, to your analogy, that left and was a beggar, and when he came home, the father met him with the robe and put a ring on his finger and had a big cookout and everything, because he was overwhelmed with joy because what was lost came back to him. The sorrow, yeah. No one else could understand it. I'm just giving you, just trying to get a feel for what we're talking about. In other words, the sorrow that you're experiencing is because of the joy of that person? Yes. That you felt. Now, and this is what this book says. I'm going to read you from the book now. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And the selfsame well from which your laughter arises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in a potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that has given you great joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight and joy. Some of you say joy is greater than sorrow, and others say, nah, sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed. Verily, you are suspended like scales between your sorrow and your joy. Only when you are empty are you at standstill and balanced. When the treasure keeper lifts you up to weigh his gold and his silver, needs must your joy or your sorrow rise or fall. It's in balance.
You know, I've thought about that a lot of times, but I never did think about what you just said. Your joy comes from the sorrow. We've all said, oh, our sorrow comes from the joy. I get that part of it.
It does.
You're happy, and if you lose something, you're sorrowful, but I never did think about the reverse. The thing that has made you sorry and brought you sorrow is the thing that you will rejoice about.
When it changes.
When it changes.
And, you know, it popped in my head to do this show on joy and sorrow because I am comfortable with the fact that several, maybe, of my friends that are listening to this program have recently lost a loved one. And they're in deep, deep sorrow.
Nothing hurts any worse.
The pain is almost basically unbearable. And what he's saying is the depth of that sorrow is exactly equal to the depth of the joy that you experience from having that person. So rejoice in being able to have the sorrow.
So you're saying not only is it okay to have the sorrow and to shed tears and to cry, you should rejoice in the fact that it does hurt so much because that individual meant that much to you.
And that individual brought you that much joy while they were with you.
Boy, that's a fantastic way to look at it.
So my friends, try it. It may be of some benefit and it may not, but something told me I needed to do this today, so I'm doing it.
Gary, it's a great lesson. So instead of saying I'm trying to hold back and I'm trying not to cry or I'm trying not to have sorrow or be sad, you're saying go ahead and embrace it.
And rejoice in it.
Because that person brought that amount of joy to you.
And
So you can't have one without the other, can you?
Not in this life.
Yeah.
You can't have all joy all the time. Things will go wrong. Things will happen. Sorrow will sneak in, as it says, if it's asleep under your bed when you're or whatever. And then when you see the sorrow, take it in and feel the sorrow, understand it's directly related to your joy. And if you're having the sorrow, just understand that you're now setting yourself up to have the joy. So
Yeah. When you and I were getting ready to do this program, I showed you a picture that I took on a trip, and there had been the storm the night before, howling winds, rain, all that good stuff. But the next morning was probably one of the most beautiful sunrises I've ever seen. And it's kind of goes along with what you're saying in the book. Without that sorrow, you can't experience that great joy.
that's right. It's the way it is. So my friends, I hope you are feeling a little better in the sorrow you're feeling, and that you are taking it and understanding where it came from. and it was the joy that you had.
You know, when you think about that and you put it in perspective, yeah, when we leave this world, we hope that someone is sorry that we're gone. That means we made an impact.
Mm-hmm.
We brought some joy to somebody.
That's right. He has another little thing in this same book on working, and you hear a lot about working right now on the media and everything. And so really, what does this, remember this guy is a Lebanese Christian that wrote this little book in the 30s. And so it's still appropriate, in my opinion, to today.
Almost 100 years later.
Yeah. So let's see what he has said about work. So folks, if you don't mind, listen up. I'm going to read you what this guy says about work. You work that you may keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. For to be idle is to become a stranger unto the seasons, and to step out of life's progression that marches in majesty and proud submission toward the infinite. So what's he saying? It's bad to be idle.
You, Gary, you love what you do. I mean, what you do as a profession, you love it. You've said
That's
before, It's my hobby, it's everything.
Now, what else does he say about work? When you work, you are a flute through which heart the whispering of the hours turns to music. Which of you would be a reed, dumb and silent, when all else sings together in unison? Always you have been told that work is a curse and labor a misfortune. But I say to you that when you work, you fulfill a part of earth's furthest dream, assigned to you when that dream was born. And in keeping yourself with labor, you are in truth loving life. And to love life through labor is to be intimate with life's innermost secrets. But if in your pain call birth and affliction, and the support of the flesh a curse written upon your brow, then I answer that naught but the sweat of your brow shall wash away that which is written. You have been told also that life is darkness, and in your weariness you echo what was said by the weary. And I say that life is indeed darkness, save when there is urge. And all urge is blind, save when there is knowledge. And all knowledge is vain, save when there is work. And all work is empty, save when there is love. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself and to one another and to God.
Wow. You know, as you were reading that, I was just going through my head about the amount of people that you come in contact with that are doing a job and doing a service that you can absolutely tell that they love what they're doing.
That's right. You see it.
I mean, it shows.
A little bit more of what he says about work. Work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work and sit at the gate of the temple and take alms of those who work with joy. For if you bake bread with indifference, you bake a bitter bread that feeds but half man's hunger. And if you grudge the crushing of the grapes, your grudge distills a poison in the wine. And if you sing, though as angels, and love not the singing, you muffle man's ears to the voices of the day and the voices of the night.
Boy, that was encouragement for a career change if you're not happy, isn't it?
He says it's best to take alms.
In other words, you're wasting your time. If you're doing a job that you can't stand, you're probably going to do a pretty poor job at it.
I just think it's interesting. This guy had a lot of insight into human nature and how we really ought to look at life.
What I find interesting about this book, the Dale Carnegie book, and some of the other books that you and I have read, they're over 100 years old, but they still apply today.
I don't think anything changes except the people.
Well, human nature doesn't change, does it?
Well, it would be nice if it did, wouldn't it?
You know, I've wondered how we were going to come out of this post-pandemic. Let me tell you a little test I did on the short trip I took. Every time I walk during the morning, I always say good morning to everyone that I pass by. And normally the routine was one person would say good morning back, then the next person would just look at you but not speak, and then the third person would just walk straight on by you and not even acknowledge you. And I wondered, coming out of the pandemic that we are, how it would be. It was a lot better. About 3 out of 3, almost every time when you would see somebody to say good morning, they smiled and said good morning. You've always told me whenever something bad happens, you say, Keith, this is an opportunity for something good to happen. This pandemic was horrible, but I think people are coming out of it with a better reverence for life because of what was taken away.
I don't think there's any question about that. There is a definite reverence for life now that my friends didn't have before. Just the reverence for being able to be outside.
To be able to see people.
To be able to not have to wear a mask.
Yes.
Good.
To know you're vaccinated, you're okay, that you can go places, you can see things, you can go into a restaurant and sit. When did we ever think we were going to take for granted the fact you could go into a restaurant and sit down and get a meal? I tell you, it feels pretty special now, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. It sure does.
And boy, are you thankful to be able to do it. Because a lot of those things were taken away from us. And that goes back to what you read right at the beginning of the show, the joy and the sorrow. You didn't appreciate those things until they were lost.
We had the sorrow, now we've got the joy.
Amen. Yes, we had the sorrow of not being able to do a lot of things.
I want to read you one more thing from this book before we put it away. And it's about this woman spoke saying, tell us of pain. And he said, your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Even as the stone of the fruit must break, that its heart may stand in the sun, so must you know pain. And could you keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life? Your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. And you would watch with serenity through the winters of your grief. Now, the pain he's talking about is the pain of grief.
Okay.
Much of your pain is self-chosen. It is the bitter potion by which the physician sees within you heals your sick self. Therefore, trust the physician and drink his remedy in silence and tranquility. For his hand, though heavy and hard, is guided by the tender hands of the unseen. And the cup he brings, though it burns your lips, has been fashioned of the day which the potter has moistened with his own sacred tears. So he's saying, pretty well, when you feel this pain, don't let it consume you. Let it become part of your life just as the seasons are.
It's just a part of life, something that we're going to go through.
It's life. Again. I mean, guy's pretty smart.
You know, yeah, and he has an eloquent way of putting it into words that just flow, doesn't he?
Yeah, except a lot of them you don't understand.
Yeah.
But
well, with the pain, you had a quote, I think, that someone had sent you about letting something consume you, and the quote compared it to a bird flying over, said it's...
Oh, here it is. Marshall Ison told me this.
Uh-huh.
Some of you may know Marshall. He's from Letcher County. He said, think of your thoughts as a bird flying overhead. You cannot stop it from flying, but you can prevent it from building a nest.
Kind of goes along with what the book was saying about grief.
Yeah, your thoughts.
Yeah. I mean...
You can't stop them.
Can't stop the bird from flying over, but if it stops on your head and starts building a nest, you can shoo it away.
You can shoo it away and not buy into it.
I thought that was good.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a good analogy.
You know, the thinking You know, we've got a book now that says you can't stop thinking. We started out asking our friends if you'll just think. That's what we want you to do. And now we're on a book that says you can't stop thinking, but at some point in time you have to think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Well, you will think.
Regardless.
And you will have thoughts.
Some of them are just outlandish.
The question in Nancy Collier's book is what she's talking about is, do you buy into those thoughts and make them you?
You know, since you talked about these thoughts coming in, whether you invited them or not, I've kind of taken a little notebook and kept up with it. It's really funny, some of the things that pop into your head, and you think, where in the world did that come from?
Your thoughts are a strange thing. And it will, as Nancy Collier says, in your imagination, you will build a movie about the events around you that probably has absolutely nothing to do with what's really going on.
I liked what she said, that you and I can go see a movie and we come back, and if you ask us what we watched, we both have two different stories. And she was saying that's the same thing with life. The two of you can be there, but you see two completely different movies.
I guess I'm trying to find an example to...
I think the example that, Gary, you remember you told me about the car coming into the town and it stopped at the gas station to ask about the people in the town? Wouldn't that be a good example?
Yeah. This fellow was at this gas station and ran into this old man. He was coming into this town. And he said to the old man, "What are the people like in the town?" And the old man said, "Well, what were they like where you left?" And he said, "Oh, they were awful, horrible, terrible people. Couldn't stand any of them." He said, "Well, that's exactly the way they are in the town you're going to." Later, another guy came along, asked the same exact question to the old man. The old man asked him, he said, "Well, what were the people like where you came from?" He said, "Wonderful. Good neighbors, perfect people, help you any way they could, really nice people." The old man said, "Well, that's exactly what you'll find up here in this town."
That tells it all, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Your movie is predicting
Yourself.
So if you set out on a trip and you say, oh, this is going to be a horrible trip, it's going to be miserable. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be miserable.
As Henry Ford said, if you think you fail or if you think you will succeed, you're right.
Either way, you're self-predicting what's going to happen.
You're determined.
And I know some of our friends will say, oh, that's nonsense. But it is true, and we do it even without thinking. We make predictions of failure or winning for some odd reason without even thinking about it.
My friends, I can tell you what a bunch of you are doing, and I know it as good as I know my name. Any little situation that comes up, you are thinking it through with your thoughts and coming up with a negative answer to to what's going on. And it's always going to be a negative one.
100%. Yeah. I told you a couple of weeks ago I did a project, and my friend asked me, said, how do you think it'll go? I said, oh, it'll never work. And then I caught myself and I said, why would you say that? But we do it instinctively. We come up with a negative reaction.
It's always a negative. I see it all the time in people that tell me about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, it's not what's going on. It's what they have conjured up as being what's going on based upon the negative thoughts that they're having in their mind.
They produce this movie that
They
becomes
produce a
real.
movie which becomes real to them. And nobody's immune to it, my friends.
None of us.
None of us.
Because any time there's any interaction or there's anything going on in our lives, we try to figure out why it's happening. And we come up with all these answers that are always wrong.
Or what they're thinking.
Got that over the weekend. The wife and I were talking, and she said, I know what you were thinking. And I said, I will bet you 100% you had no idea what I was thinking.
It's a lot worse than you were thinking it was.
Absolutely. If you knew what I was thinking, I'd be sleeping on the couch. Yeah, it was a lot worse. So you're right. So the book, you'll have to help me with pronouncing his name.
I can't pronounce it.
Is it Khalil Gibran? Or
Khalil
Close
Gibran,
enough.
I don't know.
Well, whatever it was. Joy and sorrow. Great lesson. And unfortunately, I know you're right. We've had friends that probably lost somebody over the holiday weekend, and it's always tough when it's that time. But as you pointed out, the greater the sorrow simply means the greater the joy that you had. Good lesson. You can catch Gary's television program Tuesday nights on WYMT, your CBS affiliate in Eastern Kentucky. It's at 7 p.m. Late night replay is on in Central Kentucky on your CBS affiliate, WKYT. If you start your week early or your weekend early, you can catch us on the Fox affiliate Monday morning, 6:30 a.m., Friday morning at 6:30 a.m. If you'd like to get in touch with Gary and make a comment, or if you need Gary's services, you can do that. Gary at GaryCJohnson.com. My friend, good lesson.
I hope.
I promise you there's going to be one that needs it. On behalf of Gary C. Johnson, I'm Keith Casebolt. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. As always, Gary and I look forward to seeing you again next week, right here at this same time.
Thank you for listening to Simply the Law of Life, a program created by attorney Gary C. Johnson. Until next week, may you be safe, blessed, and happy.
If you're hurt, injured, don't waste time. Gary Johnson cries for every dime.
I'm Gary C. Johnson. You've seen these billboards and ads that say size matters. I agree. The size that matters is the size of the results the law firm gets for their clients. We have several multi-million-dollar verdicts here in Kentucky. In fact, our firm owns the record for the single largest personal injury verdict in the state of Kentucky. That's the size that matters to you. In Kentucky, give our firm the call.